think collecting for me now feels like a responsibility, owning the narrative of our history, and I feel that every opportunity I have to share the collection in terms of the narrative I'm trying to build around that collection and what that means. Every single piece of art in this house has a story to it and has a meaning and has a very deep cultural narrative that goes with it. For me, I feel there's a responsibility to be able to support artists, both modern and contemporary artists, those that are alive and those that have passed, and ensuring that the next generation coming through, my children and other people's children, understand the importance of our art. It's probably the richest art I've ever seen. So my name's Tunji Akintokun, and as you can probably tell from my name, it's of Nigerian heritage. And I will class myself as being British born of Nigerian heritage. I was born in London, and I guess in terms of a day job, I worked pretty much my whole life in technical companies. So I'm a technologist by heart. That's what I did my degree in, and I've always worked within the tech industry with a few years in professional services as a management consultant and a few roles around that. So why African art? So for me, actually, it was interesting. So I was quite fortunate when I was a teenager to have a mentor when I was at university, and my mentor was a businessman, and he gave me some advice on different things to do, different things to invest in and think more longer term. And one of the things he told me to do was to invest in art. And he said, first of all, learn about art, but invest in it. And his kind of feedback to me was that art will always outdo the stock market long term. So as a result of that, that was my journey, how I started. But it wasn't with African art to start with. My favourite, I guess, style of art is actually surrealism, and I love Salvador Dali. And I realised very, very quickly I wasn't going to be able to afford that. So just by pure accident, I was walking in North London, in Willesden, and I came across a gallery and saw some really cool work. It was abstract, and I went in and realised it was actually African art, and that was where my journey started in terms of learning more about both modern and contemporary African art, but also starting to collect. So first and foremost, he said to invest as in like financial investment, but I would say that that journey changed for me quite early from when I started to collect. I didn't look at the investment of the money, I looked at the art and what that meant. And when I made the decision to pivot towards African art, that had a different meaning for me in terms of investing in my culture, but more importantly, understanding in it. So that investment was in my own knowledge to be able to then be able to look at that market differently, but to collect it as well, because I really wanted to have my heritage and my identity reflected in my own homes. So that's where my journey started. And I think over the years, there's a saying I always say in life: you learn, you earn, and you return. I think when I started to collect was when the earning was transitioning more to returning, because I then started over the years to put my collection together in a much more thoughtful and philanthropic way. So the relationship for me with artists is quite personal, and I think if I look at my day job, I work in technology, in sales and in marketing. It's a personal business in that you get to know your client or you know your customer, and you build that relationship both professionally and personally. That's no different to the artists that I collect. I would say that pretty much most of the artists in my collection, where they're alive, I've had the opportunity to meet them. And I do build that relationship over time in the same way when you're in a sales job, you're building that customer journey. It's not a one-off interaction, it's over a period of time. So for young and up and coming artists, I spend my time researching them, supporting them, visiting their shows when they had them on, or their exhibitions, or in some cases, certainly their galleries. There are many artists that I've taken the opportunity, maybe one just to mention is Shannon Bono. So we have our art in our collection. I've been down to her studios and I continue to support her in what she does. So I've got to know her well, I've got to know her mum quite well, and the people around her, and I think that's important with all of the artists to be able to build up that relationship. And maybe another one, which is a great example, is Lemmy Gariokwu. So I met him through a friend actually who originally said, hey, you know, his work's fantastic, you're a big fan of Fela, do you know this person? I said, I've heard of him. And I got to know him, and as a result of that you know, followed into a really fantastic private commission that I had Lemmy do for me on one of my favourite album covers. And I've got to know him well, continue to follow him, you know, keep in contact. And I think that's, for me, is how you build that relationship with an artist over time. So it's not a one-off transaction, and then that's it, it's hanging on your wall and, you know, you're proud of it. It's getting a bit deeper with understanding the artist, and if you're fortunate enough to get to know them personally, you know, I think that builds a much deeper understanding of them, their work, and probably more importantly, you know, you're able to really build up that kind of rapport over a long period of time. So it's very important for me. My first piece of serious work I bought was around the turn of the century, actually around 2000, and it was by an artist called Benga Offo. And I remember I bought them from a gallery in Willesden. It's called Kaleidoscope, actually, the gallery. It was owned by the late Carl Barry, who was actually an artist in his own right. But he was a phenomenal artist gallery owner that visited sub-Saharan Africa a lot. He was very knowledgeable and bought a lot of artists. And he had these two beautiful paintings. Actually, there were three in the series. And two of them I really liked. It was a man and a woman. And they actually reminded me of my own parents, and I bought them, and they were the first two that I bought, and to this day I still have those two paintings, and they're two of my favourites. I tend to veer more now towards emerging, and I think that, and you're right, I think it's balanced. I like both, so I wouldn't say I have a preference, but if I look at my collection over the last, or what I've collected over the last maybe year or two, it's probably more emerging artists, and that's because I really want to be able to support them as well, because I think, you know, an artist's journey when they start, you know, is dependent on collectors collecting their work to be able to allow them to produce more. So I'm really conscious that I have an obligation there as well to look at that work. So I do seek out emerging artists, and you know, for me, there's some phenomenal talent out there, and for me, that's where I kind of focus probably a little bit more towards that than the more established artists. But equally, you know, someone like Ben and Wonwo's work coming up, I'm not going to turn around and say, oh no, that's too old for me. Never. You know, there's certain artists that are more established now. I mean, I guess if you're looking at it purely financial, and I don't, there is also an advantage when you are able to spot good emerging artists, in that they do actually work out to be quite good investments. And I've certainly been fortunate to invest early in an artist, and now when I look at their work, it makes my eyebrows twitch a bit. I think, wow, that's interesting. So it's good, and I'm pleased for the artists as well. But yeah, I'd say at the moment probably looking one eye more towards emerging, but equally established artists. I think it's nice to have that mix in your collection. That's a great question, but I will probably speak and yeah, culturally, you probably know that most African collectors, we're hoarders. We don't sell much, so we collect because we like to have a great collection. And I think that's also testament to the fact that I'm true to my word, in that it's not just about collecting to sell or flip and make money from them. I'm not. I'm looking to build a really great story and a narrative around, you know, African modern and contemporary art. And for that reason alone, I'm going to collect as I go along. So I will wait. I'm more likely to see and think, wow, that's gone up considerably. However, I'm glad we've got a piece in our collection, and I'll keep saving until I can get the next piece that I want to get. I think that's a generational thing, personally, and I think it's also the appreciation of collecting art per se. If I look at my parents' generation, there were probably more of my parents' generation that looked at more classic African art, and they collected more. And I've heard lots of stories of people of my age and even the next generation down, and I worry about my own children actually in terms of their appreciation of art, because what you find is that with the classics, people don't often appreciate or understand it well. There's a huge amount of a journey when you're collecting. You start off and you may buy the odd piece here and then, it looks nice, but when you really get into it, it's really deep and it's really rich, and it does require a lot of time and effort to research. And I think with the classics, as the generations go down, then as modern and contemporary have become more prevalent, people have found that that's a natural area to go to. Even studying, if you want to go and study classic, that's harder. If you want to do modern and contemporary, you can go and do a course at SOAS and you can learn more about that. But the classic part, you really have to do your own work. And there aren't that many people around that you can go to. You probably have to go to museums and a few curators to get schooled on that. So I think that's probably, from my perspective, why you don't see as many. But I've got people that are kind of my age whose parents were collectors, and they have a much better appreciation of classic because they've either inherited and they understand what they've inherited, or it's something that they've been given that knowledge of by their parents to then start to investigate more and research more around it and may collect more on that side. So, but for me, I think there's such a rich amount of art in the modern and contemporary space to focus on, in that hopefully when I retire in a few years, I'll have time to really research classic, and maybe it's something I'll pick up. I'm not going to say one. My first two paintings from Benga Offo are sentimental, so they mean a lot to me because that was when I really started seriously collecting. I'd say my first commission piece, because that meant a lot for me as a collector, to have a well-established artist commission something that I wanted. So my picture would be some Nation by Lenny Garioku, for me means a lot for me. And I have to say, I'm just really honoured to have a piece of Yinka Shonibari's work in my collection, and I think that, I don't think any collection can't have one, so that's probably from a painting's perspective. From sculptures, then Ni Olagunju is he's probably my favourite. I just love the work he does, and in fact, interesting story. So I bought the first piece, Mangbetu, probably a few years ago now, and I remember getting it and I loved it, and I'd seen it twice, and sometimes you just know when a piece is meant for you. I'd gone to actually a talk at a bank around African modern and contemporary art, and in their atrium they had a load of work, of which this particular sculpture was there, and I was just like, God, I love this piece. I went away, and then about 2 weeks later I went to 154 at Somerset House, and that piece was there, and I thought, I keep bumping into this piece, and I bought it, and I bought it, and I remember I bought it on the first day. It was the first thing I walked in, so I walked in, I thought again, I thought, right, I'm buying it, I have to. Did a deal, bought the piece, and then got to know Nian and talk about that personal relationship. Then after about a year, 2 years, I realised that the man was quite lonely by himself and he should have a woman with him, and I thought, I really do want to have a piece that matches, and we hadn't moved here to this house, so I knew I was going to have this sculpture as a central piece of my house, and I wanted another piece. So again, I asked Ni, and I got to know him, would he produce one the same size but of a woman, and he did that for me, so I'm really proud to have a pair. The advice I give to all of them is do a bit of research. You don't have to do a bucket load, but do enough to be at least knowledgeable and understand and appreciate that. Get to know people that do know a bit more, so surround yourself around people that know art well, and most people that are in the art fraternity are pretty friendly people. They like to share the knowledge they have, and then probably just try and narrow down to a couple of particular types of art that you like, and then decide what your budgets are. And then for me, it's very simple. You can start small. You can buy a small piece, and certainly my mentees, I've encouraged them, like, just buy one piece a year. Just have a budget. It could be maybe even £1,000 or a few £1,000s, but buy one piece. When you've got a bit of research, a bit of guidance, you can go to even some advisors and they'll tell you what your budget can get, and buy a piece that you like, that kind of fits within the areas that you're looking at. Once you have that piece, then make a conscious effort to add maybe one piece every year. And that's all you need to do. Because even if you collected one piece a year, 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, you suddenly have quite a nice collection of work. And what will happen over that period of time is that your focus, your taste, your knowledge of the art will increase, and then you'll start to buy maybe a bit bigger piece or a more substantial piece, or you'll refine your type of art that you like. It might start off being figurative, but it may move over to portraiture, maybe to abstract work you like. You might like sculptures more. So you can always focus on one area that you get joy from, and that's probably the most important thing I say to young people that want to collect, or even older people to be fair, is to just start the journey and buy the art with a balance between getting some good advice and then buying a piece that you like as well, because I think the heart and the head go together. I would genuinely say that yes, I've got some really nice pieces from an investment perspective, have done well, but equally every single piece I have here I love, and it's probably with my heart that I bought it first and I love that, but it's backed up with some really good research behind why I've gone there in the first place. So I'd say to any artist, start small, buy little, just start the journey, do your research. You can go, there's plenty of places you can go and learn. Even online now, there's lots of courses that can get you started, but some great establishments here in London and across the UK that actually put on courses in modern and contemporary African art just to get you started. So that would be my advice.